Hey, everybody, this is Catherine Barnes. I am here today on the Wonderful Being podcast with my friend, actually a very old friend from a long time ago, Tori Noquez.
Hi.
Tori is a magician and she's also a professor of mathematics at St. Mary's College of California. So you're back in California now.
Finally, yes.
I'm
Yes, I
so
am.
happy about that. That is
Me
wonderful.
too. Yeah.
So Tori and I actually know each other from Scripps Ranch High School. Actually, even
Yeah,
before that, I think Marshall Middle School
that's
was
right.
where
Yeah.
we originally met, which is crazy. And what I remember about you, mostly from high school, I thought of you as being like a science and music kind of person. Like you'd walk around through the hall like with a guitar, like just like playing, and
I
you went
did
to all
do
the
that.
open mics and like you
Yeah.
had Mraz attacks written on your jeans.
Right. Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So let's start with like how did you go from science to math?
Yeah, so that's a super fair question. So yes, I was like the science kid, right? I was really into space. That was kind of my thing, right?
Space
Remember
camp,
that? I went
yes,
to space
yes.
camp a bunch of times. Yeah. Um, so at some point, maybe late high school, I discovered that the part of science that I actually really liked was the theoretical part. And
Mhm.
I discovered at some stage that I was not good at labs. Like, I mean, and when I say not
Mm.
good, I mean like I did fine. It was high school, but like it wasn't it didn't suit me. I feel like it's the same reason I don't like cooking. Like I just
Huh.
it's applied, like there's error, you spill stuff, I spill stuff. So
Wait, okay, so I have to ask you, okay, this is
yeah.
very interesting to me because I have the same problem. Like labs to me were just so stressful because there was all this stuff you had to
Yeah.
have, and like sometimes like the substrate wasn't, you had to like wash it a million times before it
Yes.
weighed what it was supposed to, but we didn't have time to do that because we had other
Same.
classes to go to.
High
But
school, right.
this is blowing my mind though, because
Yeah, because I
I
was a
think,
science kid, right? This was supposed to be my shtick and I didn't like it. So
well, and you're a magician, and to me, magic involves like a whole bunch of stuff. So how
oh,
is
it
magic
does.
different from like a science lab?
Oh, that's a great question. So okay, let me put this all together. So yes, so I discovered that the lab stuff, the applied stuff was what I did not like. I liked
Mhm.
theory and somehow made my way all the way to abstract math, which is like the far end of theory. So
Okay.
that's kind of like how that progression went.
Mhm.
And then as far as like the comparison to something like magic, I would say that a big difference is that you're in a lot more control of what's going on. So like science is science, right? And you're
Mhm.
like doing a lab and there's like a result you maybe expect, and then you can
Mhm.
like control certain factors and then observe certain other factors and like figure out what it means, right? But in contrast to that, magic is a performance art. Like as the artist, you get to decide like if something isn't working for you for this reason, you don't have to do it, right?
Mm.
So yeah, I would say the sort of the motivation or the approach is really different in a lot of ways, even though there is some crossover in the sort of physicality of it. But honestly, I would say, to connect to your earlier point about being a music kid, I would say it's actually a lot like music in a lot of ways. That there's, a physical component, like, playing an instrument or, dealing cards or whatever. And that there's a performance art aspect. So there's
Mhm.
connecting with an audience or like creating material that tells or conveys a message or whatever it is your intention is as the artist. So I would say it's more similar to that than anything like lab science.
Huh. Okay, that's
Yeah.
really interesting. So you went to Carnegie Mellon for your undergrad, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And did you stick with music while you were there, or did that kind of go by the wayside as you were busy?
No, so when I was in undergrad, music was largely by the wayside. I didn't have time. It was
Right.
yeah, and there wasn't a lot of there was CMU had some kind of they definitely had a marching band and like this and that, but I just didn't have time for it. I also didn't do magic in undergrad, incidentally.
Right.
I
Yeah.
really didn't, yeah. So I mean, I was just doing math. Like that was kind of the thing. And then when I was in grad school, I picked it back up. I was in like a pretty bad garage band through most of grad school, just with other math grad students. So yeah, it's always been something I've like done for fun, but it
Mhm.
was never something I pursued like out of the garage, you know.
Yeah. No, I get what you mean by that. So
Yeah.
it sounds to me because you found magic at age 22, and I'm going to
That's
ask
right.
you that story in a minute,
Yeah.
but you were done with your undergrad at that point, right?
Yes, yes.
Had
Yeah.
you started grad school when you
Yes,
discovered
yeah. I was
magic?
a couple years into my PhD in math. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Where did you do your PhD in math?
I started at UCLA, and then I decided that I wanted to work with a different advisor. So I went to University of Illinois at Chicago, which is where I like graduated from. Yeah.
Okay, so UCLA, that was where you were when you had your experience at the Magic Castle, which
Yes.
I'd love to hear all about that.
Okay. Yeah. So for those who are not familiar, the Magic Castle is a private club in Hollywood. It's the inspiration for the Gothic Castle in Arrested Development, if you know about that. And it's a totally real place. So it's a private club, and they have a super strict dress code. You have to be in cocktail attire. So that's a suit and tie or cocktail dress or thereabouts. And you can't just go, you have to be invited by a member. So it's like this weird exclusive thing that people in LA like know about, but not everybody's found a way to go. So when I was at UCLA and I was living in LA, and I was 22 years old, my mom was in Hollywood for like must have been a conference or something for work, and somebody to do with the conference like arranged a trip to the Magic Castle. So they were like a member or friends with a like they had some inroad that was very indirect. So somehow I got to go, and it was just like the coolest thing I had ever seen or done, just ever. And one of the things, I think this is just from being like a lifer student, one of the things like I do as an audience member is I tend to like sit in the front and make a lot of eye contact, which is also how I approached being in class. And I got picked to volunteer, to be the person to pick a card or whatever, and like all of the shows I saw that night. And I just thought it was so cool. So I immediately went home and signed up for they offer classes there. So I signed up for the classes, and then about 5 months later, I auditioned. So to become a member of this club, the Magic Castle, you have to audition for a committee, or you can join as an associate member, and that's just like a regular private club membership. So it's just very expensive. But yeah, so I auditioned, I became a member, and I just kind of kept going with it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested to know, like, and you talked a little bit about it. It sounded like, sitting in the front row and making the eye contact and all that. But what was it about that experience that made you say in the middle of your math PhD, oh my God, I have to learn how to do this?
Yeah. So there was one show in particular. It was the last show of the night. So the type of magic I do, I'm a close-up magician, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's like cards and coins and stuff. And the very last show of the night was in a room at the Magic Castle called the Close-Up Gallery, which is what it sounds like. And the magician was a gentleman named Luis, who he was just so good. It was just so good. And he was so cool. And two things I did when I went home that night. I signed up to take classes, and I emailed him, and I was like, dude, this was so cool, and I want to do this. And this is the first time I've ever seen close-up magic. I didn't really know, like a lot of people are not like exposed to magic out in the wild. Like this is not it's not an experience I had ever had. And yeah, throughout my experience, he served as kind of a mentor to me. Not exactly a teacher, but kind of like a mentor in the magic community. So understanding, getting involved, and how to, attend lectures and hang out at magic shops, and then ultimately how to get booked at different venues and stuff like this. So he was, so that was like a big part of it. It wasn't just that this one night was so cool, but also that I had this person as an initial contact who was so supportive. Yeah, so that was a big part of like kind of the right things at the right time. And that I was living in LA. So I had this like premier magic venue that I could hang out at and like get exposed to it. Yeah, so that was definitely a very big part of it. And we lost Luis to COVID-19 in 2021. So I'm forever indebted for how he introduced me to this art form. Yeah, so sorry.
What was his
honor? Yeah,
it's a bummer, but what was his last name?
Solorzano. So he went by Magic of Luis. So if you look that up, yeah, and he was Los Angeles based. Yeah. So I'm really lucky that I had 10 years of fantastic mentorship from him. So wow. that was like the right combo of things that just got me into it, and then I kept going with it.
Okay. So how did you balance being in school and learning all this crazy high level math with being basically a beginner at magic?
It's not easy. So I will say this, one of the things that has worked for me throughout schooling is having like other outlets. So I mean, typically, and you saw this to be the case when I was a kid, like when I have like a thing I'm excited about, I get really, really into it. So like I was really into space and space camp, or really into music or whatever. And so, and I've had a few things like that sort of throughout schooling and now as a grown up with a job. But magic has been the most sustaining one for sure. And so, yeah, it's like, it's a lot of work and it's very hard. But it kind of serves as like a constructive break from like school stuff, if that makes sense. So like I was talking to one of my collaborators about this recently. Like I can kind of procrastinate doing work by like doing this other work. So it's kind of it's sort of like, I don't know. It's like, it's for fun, even though it's work. So it definitely serves as like just balancing out this crazy hard stuff I'm doing in like day job.
So it sounds like it might actually help you though. Like it sounds like it's not just like a procrastination, like, binging Netflix or something.
Oh, right. Yes, totally. Right. Because it definitely satisfies some, like creative outlet. And in a lot of ways, I mean, this is sort of a tricky line to kind of categorize it. But in some ways it uses a sort of definitely a different skill set, but a different part of my brain too, that I get to, pursue this kind of artistic passion, which, not that math research doesn't have creativity in it, but like it's different, of course, so yeah, it is a very constructive sort of like good for me like way to sort of procrastinate, such as it is.
Okay. So would you say that, because you've kind of talked about how magic helps you with math, like it gives your brain a different outlet, it gives it kind of a break from what it does when it's doing math. Would you say that the math has been helpful to you as a magician?
Oh, totally. Yeah, definitely. One of the big ways in which it's been super helpful is the relationship between teaching and performing.
Yes. Okay. So I was actually going to ask you about that because I saw Steve Bryant wrote,
Oh yeah,
you have a teacher's authority over the audience. And I want to know more about that.
yeah, so that's the biggest connection. I mean, math itself, just to answer your original question, in some ways, yes. If you just think about, like, again, I always draw back to this sort of comparison to music, but you think about like patterns and like what's appealing to kind of the human brain, right? This is not it's not mathematical, right? But yeah, I would say the more obvious connection between my like career work and my pursuit of magic is definitely my experience teaching. So yeah, Steve definitely had a good quote about how I manage an audience. And yeah, it's a fine line that you have to be careful of, because and I've had this question asked to me, like, what do you do to keep it from like feeling like a lecture, right? Because there's nothing worse than going to a show and feeling like you're sitting in a calculus class at 8 in the morning, right? But that being said, there's a few places where it does come up. One is just with hecklers, right? So as performance artists, we all have different types of heckling. It happens to everyone. And handling it graciously, I think I learned from doing so in the classroom, but like keeping everybody on your team as much as you can, right? So versus like, you need to sit down and put that away, like instead of like, hey, yo, what are you doing? Like, we're doing a thing up here, can you pay attention? Thanks. Like, just it's a tone thing that I kind of developed naturally in classrooms and have sort of adapted to the stage environment. So that's one of them. Another big one that I'm actually really proud of, have a specific instance of it that came up in my last run at the Magic Castle. I had a lady who I asked to help out with a trick that was just to like look at a spread of cards and pick one and remember it, and then figure it out. And we were like kind of getting ready to do it, and she seemed really nervous, and she was like kind of turning to the person she was with and sort of chatting, and I was like, hey, what's going on? And she was like, when she spoke, she's clearly not a native English speaker. And she's like, oh, I don't know what the suits are, essentially. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I just like flipped into teacher mode, and I was like, all right. So I just like walked through them. I had the audience on my team. They were like, and she had a great time. So like, that was definitely like teacher background, to not shame her, not be like, what kind of idiot doesn't know the suits? Like, you know,
Right.
to just meet her where she was at, because she was clearly trying to, like, it wasn't heckling, she was trying to participate. So yeah, that's like a very classroom skill. Like that's not
Mm.
out of my like performance experience necessarily. So yeah, that's definitely the biggest connection where, yeah, the day job connects to what I do on stage. Yeah.
And that's interesting too, because, you know, when I hear that you're a professor of math,
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know that you're doing a lot of classroom instruction. Like I picture you like
Right.
wearing a tweed hat and like making your graduate students do everything. But like
Yes,
you were that graduate student for a long time, so I
I
guess that's where
was.
you learned.
Yes. And it's both, right?
Uh-huh.
So yeah, there is a lot of the tweed hat and the chalkboard and the like thinking, right? But that being said, there's this sort of like interesting and maybe, I don't know, it's evolving over time, but this kind of like, I'm not gonna say unspoken, it's totally spoken, but like juxtaposition between research and teaching in STEM academia. So
Mhm.
like a lot of positions even are touted as being mainly research or mainly teaching. And like in my career, I've sort of had to navigate that. So especially as a grad student, the places that have grad programs are mainly research focused. So that's kind of the culture that you're exposed to when you're joining the profession. So that being said, I like both. So yeah, I just you know, in my most recent position when I was at Indiana University, I was teaching very little. And for a whole year, I just had one class of PhD students who I just come talk at them, and then they had to go figure their stuff out, and that was the whole thing, you know. But in my new position that I just started at St. Mary's, it's a liberal arts college, so it's
Mm.
mainly undergrad, and I get to do that classroom stuff and like connect with undergrad students, which um, is like, it's a part of the job that I really appreciate.
Wow.
But I like having space for both. So yeah, and
Mhm.
that's kind of the like middle ground I had to navigate my job search. Was that like, yeah, I want to have the resources to do my own research and, you know, collaborate with upper level colleagues and stuff. But I also want to like chat with 18-year-olds about like why linear algebra is cool, you know? So this
Why
is,
wait, why is linear algebra cool?
oh, it's super cool. So, I mean, what it, okay, man, I didn't prep anything for this. Yeah. So, look, it's like, it gives us a framework to study a bunch of different stuff. So this is sort of the buy-in for a lot of more abstract math, is that what you're doing is you're looking at some part of math that like people care about for some reason. Okay.
Mhm.
So like, um, you know, maybe engineers need to use I'm just using words now. This doesn't matter. Anyway, there's some part of math that some people care about. And then as mathematicians, we look at that and say, okay, what rules do those follow? Here's some like abstracted version of the thing we care about. Now, just based on that information, what do we know? And then you can take the thing you know and apply it to a bunch of different stuff. So that's kind of
Mm.
my like 3 sentence. Here's a cool thing. But
I love it. I love it. And it
yeah.
reminds me of, okay, so I was watching you talk about how you got, what was the name of the show you were on where you did the trick for the dudes?
Penn and Teller fool us.
That's it. Yes. Okay. And you were talking about how you got on that show, and
Oh yeah.
part of what you talked about was like creating a script for your trick. And my mind was blown because I had no idea that coming up with a script was like part of magic.
Right. And if a performer is doing their job well, it shouldn't feel like they're performing a script, right?
Right. Well, of
Um,
course. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I wouldn't have known.
Yeah. And it's one of these things that, as part of the process, I mean, there's a whole lot of different schools of thought on like how to approach this in the context of magic, or even any performance art like stand-up comedy, or,
Hmm.
you know, anything where you're on stage talking at people. Um, and I wouldn't say, I don't know. Some people take a very traditional scripting process of like write the script, rewrite the script, perform
Hmm.
it, rewrite it a million times. I think I have a more organic approach usually,
Hmm.
where like I'll be working on new material and I'll have like an outline of a script and then I'll start performing it and it'll sort of evolve organically
Yeah.
with audiences. And I think part of that is because I have a background in a classroom where no, I don't write a script. I have like notes of the topics I want to cover and then I just talk at them, right? So
Well, and we kind of just saw that process right now where I caught you off guard by asking you
yeah, and I
about
was
linear
like,
algebra and but like you had your script kind of ready because this is something you talk about a lot.
right, it's something I know like really intimately. So I can talk about it with authority without preparation. But yeah, um, for the Penn and Teller thing though, because it was TV, there was like more people invested on what I said in front of a camera, right? So there was like, as far as scripting goes, it was like they needed to sort of like approve it essentially because it's their show, you know? So I did have to have something sort of more concrete and I don't even want to say exactly memorized. I think memorized by default, but not memorized the way you like memorize the like Pledge of Allegiance or something, right? Like just you know, just that I rehearsed it a billion times. But yeah, that was sort of new-ish for me because in the majority of my bookings prior to TV, I you know, usually send a tape of a previous show or like kind of an audition tape, but it's not that strict. Nobody's like, okay, this is what you're going to say on our stage, or at least those are not the types of bookings that I take. So yeah, that was sort of a new experience for that that performance in particular. Yeah.
Interesting. And you know, another thing that you and I talked about once on Instagram that's kind of related to the scripting thing was the fact that magic is a discipline that you have to practice kind of in the same way that you have to practice music. And I had absolutely no idea. So can you kind of tell us about that? Like what does magic practice look like?
Totally. Yeah. So again, there are totally different schools of thought on how this might be executed. Traditionally, one of the sort of pieces of wisdom that is usually shared around rehearsing when you're first learning is to do it in front of a mirror. That never worked for me. It was one of those things where I do it in front of the mirror and then I take the mirror away and I couldn't do it. Like it was, you know, but what does work for me, and this evolved very rapidly in the era of Zoom, is to record it. So I'll rehearse maybe with patter, so like, you know, doing like I would do for an audience, or just without and just do like, you know, physical handling of something. I'll just set my phone up and take a video of it and then watch it. And I find that to be kind of my process in rehearsing. But yeah, there's different levels of it. So like if I'm working on a new trick where I'm trying to like learn moves, there a lot of the rehearsal time, it's more learning, right? So it's more just like figuring out like, oh, this feels right to do this thing, or whereas like maybe because I go long stretches between shows too, because I don't do this full time. So like, for example, in March, I did a week in the Magic Castle and I hadn't performed since the previous November. So it'd been it'd been a long time. And so like prior to that, I was performing a show that I had done many times. So none of the material was new, but like to rehearse for that, I just did a few run throughs and made sure I like remembered what the transitions were and sort of when the beats were for, you know, to pause for reaction or whatever. So yeah, there's that type of rehearsing I feel like it's different than like it's just different levels, like anything, right? Like practicing music, like you're learning a new song, you practice it a bunch of times, you focus on like different parts that are hard or whatever. Whereas when it's like about to do a show, I can usually refresh it with a few run throughs. But that's also because it's tricks that I've performed like hundreds of times, right? So it's just like warming them up.
Okay, I hear that. And so is magic the kind of thing where it's like, because okay, with music, like let's say I'm preparing for like a lesson with my teacher, okay, and my teacher says, okay, you need to learn this piece and you're gonna play it for me in a week, okay? It's not the kind of thing where I can like not practice, and then like the night before like practice for 5 hours and then the next day be able to play it. Like that's not how it works.
Right.
Is magic the kind of thing where you need to do it like, you know, kind of a little bit consistently every day, or is it more like, you know, academics where you can cram?
It depends on the magic.
Oh.
And I'll say it also depends on the academics. I'm gonna just float that one out there.
Okay, yeah, fair.
On for a second. Depends on what you're trying to learn. So yeah, so yes and no. It depends on what you're doing. So for example, there are a lot of so like I specialize in card magic, a lot of which is very technically heavy. So there's a lot of, like playing a technical piece of music, right? There's a lot of sort of physicality, and that's the kind of thing that takes you got to do it over time. Otherwise you're not gonna like get it, because there's the sort of the mechanical like muscle memory, like getting comfortable with that, but also just like understanding sort of the nuance to doing it proficiently. So yeah, that's the type of thing that takes time for sure. There are definitely lots of other branches of magic that are less technically heavy, that are more performance driven, I would say. So like, for example, and this is not uniformly the case, I don't want to like talk out of turn, but mentalism is a branch of magic that is like, it's like mind reading type stuff. Okay. And this is not all of it, but some portion of it is less technically heavy and more performance driven. So it's more about learning how to execute the performance correctly. And that personally for me is the type of thing that I could sort of cram and do maybe somewhat decently. And again, not for every type of trick like that, and not for everyone. Like I can do that because I was in school for 500 years and did a whole lot of cramming for exams and assignments and stuff. But yeah, so it really varies by the type of trick, and there's like really broad variation just in magic in general. I mean, I said this like 800 times already, but like like music, different instruments and different genres and different stuff are going to have different requirements of sort of like what you put in versus what you can get out of it.
Yeah. So is that, I mean, because you've talked about you're a close-up magician, right? So was that at all influenced by the fact that you were also going to school, and so this was a type of magic that was accessible, or was it more like, oh my god, I love this and this is the one I pick?
Both. So yes. Yeah, so that's an excellent question. So one of the things about as opposed to like stage magic, which is like large scale illusions, like people in boxes getting cut in half and stuff like this, the breaking into that is prohibitively expensive. Right? Like, you're not going to just be some person who goes and like buys one of these massive illusions, right? So for many years, until maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was a hobbyist, right? I just did this for fun. And close-up magic, the props are decks of cards and like coins and stuff. It's not to say that those things can't become expensive. Like you buy other stuff like books and different props, and it adds up fast. But the breaking in is much more sort of realistic for a lot of reasons. But yeah, there are other parts of magic. So like it's broadly broken down into close-up magic, parlor magic, which is a little bit bigger. So if you think of like linking rings and stuff like that, where you're usually standing up, and you can usually perform for a somewhat larger audience. And then mentalism, which I mentioned, and that you can do at all different size audiences. And then of course there's like big stage magic. And then there's other branches like street magic and different stuff, but those are sort of broadly the size categories. So close up to parlor or maybe mentalism is often kind of the inroad for a layperson like me. Like I didn't come from any kind of like theater background, or, I wasn't like working with a established performer or anything. I was just like taking classes and learning what I liked. So but the fact that I landed on cards is, yes, very much that's like I just like it. Yeah.
Well, and you've got those videos where you're doing you're talking about the Pharaoh shuffles, and that's connected to math. I mean, when I think cards, I think math, like immediately.
Yeah, there is definitely an intrinsic link to patterns and understanding cards. But that being said, the stuff I perform is mainly not math. It's just sleight of hand, or it's real magic.
I mean, and embarrassingly, I mean, I wouldn't really know the difference. I mean, I knew nothing about, all these things. I will admit to you, okay, as a kid, I had a friend, a younger kid than when I knew you, okay, elementary school. I had a friend who was into magic, who was a dude, and at one point he was like, hey, I'm going to do a trick for the school talent show. Like, I'm going to levitate a woman. Will you be my beautiful assistant? And like, you know me,
Yeah.
you knew me when I'm no one's beautiful assistant. Like I'll be your awkward, like clumsy, weird looking assistant, but like I'm
Right.
not your beautiful assistant. And
I feel that.
after that, I was just like magic, like whatever. I don't care. Like I don't know. So
Yeah, that's
but it's
super fair.
but it's changing now. Like I know you, okay, and I know other magicians that
Yeah.
I've met through fringe festivals, and
Mhm.
like none of them are white dudes.
That's unusual that you even know more than one magician who's not a white dude. Like
Really?
it's really homogenous. Yeah, and it's rough. Like so I mean the exact example that you just explained is
Hmm.
what most people's perception of magic is, that women play a really specific role
Yeah.
as the assistant, essentially as a prop,
Right.
right? And so even now in 2022, it's still tough out there. It's still like there's still a lot of work to do. And even in the 12 years I've been doing magic, I've seen a lot of progress on this front. So
Really?
it's improving, yeah, which is encouraging. On the days I get discouraged, I'm like, God, this field is just like a bunch of old white dudes who are awful. Like, yes, there are still many of those, but there's a lot of not just other people joining up, but people having conversations about it. So
Mm.
the progress is it's going. It's not there, but it's like we're not done, but it's made a lot of improvement. So yeah, and part of it is just visibility.
Mm.
Like, even if you watch like even if you look at stats of a show like Penn and Teller's show, in the
Mm.
8 years they've been on the air, they've improved a lot just in like demographics that they've had on the show. And part of that is just the broader magic community has been improving. So yeah, it's going, but right. Usually it's like an old white dude who's maybe a bit creepy, who has like a young, beautiful woman as part of the stage props. And that's like really unappealing, or I find that really unappealing. And that's like deeply entrenched in the history of this art form. So yeah, that's a thing that we're all, well, not we're all, but many of us are working on. And yeah, it's going, but it's part of why, I mean, it's kind of this self-perpetuating thing. It's part of why there aren't more women or other minorities doing magic, is that the representation has been historically pretty poor. So
So it sounds like that the first step is the representation,
yeah,
and from there, that's kind of what you think will drive the change.
absolutely. And I mean, I sort of it's even analogous to the kind of efforts that I've both seen and participated in academia. I mean, STEM's
Hmm.
also male, white,
Oh
male
yeah,
dominated, right?
yeah.
So it's yeah, and of course it's different. Especially in STEM, we're not fighting this uphill battle of an existing lower role for women, right? Like
Hmm.
it's a different thing. But um it's still a similar thing, that you sort of have these steps of like increased representation really helps, and then access to entry. So
Yeah.
like you think of young kids in magic camp, or math camp, or whatever it is they're trying to do, right? You want some diversity in these things. So that raises questions of like recruitment, like how do you get kids interested, or how do so like one of the things I saw recently, oh gosh, I wish what's her name? Anna. Okay. I'm gonna find out. But there's a kid's book that just came out. It's Kostya Kimlet's wife. I should know her name. She wrote a kid's book about a girl getting interested in magic. And it's
Mm.
really cool. I haven't read it yet, but I've been looking at the press online for it. And that's just like really like early level representation, like, hey, this is a thing. Like, just because like for kids to see, ones that look like them doing a thing, they're more likely to get in. So yeah, it's at a lot of different levels, I guess, is what this long tirade was going on to say, is that it's kids breaking in, it's adults feeling comfortable pursuing it, it's creating spaces in which we can both learn and perform and present the art that we've been working on. And yeah, it's a continual fight, but it's going, which is something.
Well,
Yeah.
and I'm glad to hear that you see it going and that you see it improving. That's
Yeah.
definitely I feel much better hearing
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I'm happy to be able to say that, because 5 years ago I might not have said the same thing. So
Really? Wow, that
yeah,
recently.
yeah, and I mean, part of this is a cultural shift too, right? So like this is happening in the broader world that we're
Mhm.
addressing these things. So it's both. But yeah, fortunately, I've been really lucky too to be booked at and perform at venues that are more forward thinking on this front. So that's been that's encouraging, just to be around it. It's like for every like jerky old person who's trying to gatekeep, there's also other people, old or not, who are trying to like break that down. So yeah, it's not that bad, but
That's excellent.
yeah,
So when is the next time that we can see you perform?
I don't know yet.
Don't know yet.
So,
That's in the works.
yeah, I am. Let's see. So right. So I just moved to Oakland like a month ago. So I'm
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. So I haven't really gotten established here yet, but I do have a show in the works in Boston in January.
Cool.
Yeah, it's actually a really super cool group called the Boston Magic Lab, and I've done their virtual show. So I'll be there for a math conference. So I'm gonna do their show.
Oh no, I love it.
Yeah,
So you're
yeah,
getting
it's
you're getting
super.
like your ticket paid for and everything
Yeah,
by
yeah.
work, and oh, that's
Right. So I'm already gonna be there. So
yeah.
so I've got that. That's definitely one I have on the books for sure. Other than that, I don't know. There'll be some other bookings coming, but uh you can keep an eye on my website to see when my upcoming shows are.
And what is it? ToriNoquez.com?
Got it. Yep.
Boom. Okay.
Yeah, I just got a really great new, finally professional website put up this summer.
It looks
Before
very
that,
nice.
oh, thank you. Yeah, I hired an amazing college student named Joanna Baker who made it for me, and she did a spectacular job. So yeah, if you have any website needs, check her out. She was great. Before that, it was like this WordPress site that I had made that was like not good. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's where I'm at myself. And I love that it was a student that helped you out. That's very
Yeah, that was
cool.
part of what I wanted to do. And actually, her dad, Matt Baker, is a math professor and a magician. So
Oh, it's all full
in the
circle.
family. Yeah.
Do your students ever like ask you to do a trick? Like, do they ever?
Yeah.
I bet it's annoying.
Yeah, it varies. So it depends on the students and it depends on the vibe of the class. So
Hmm.
like when it's like a big class, and especially when it's like a big class of like lower level students that are like taking it as a requirement, and basically they're not excited about math,
Hmm.
like that's usually a recipe for disaster because like they're just trying to get through this class that they don't really care about. And like I understand that. They're not doing it wrong, right?
Right.
But then we like bust out the magic. They're like, what is, I just need to pass the test. Like, I don't care about this. Like,
Oh, they don't like it. Oh.
yeah. Whereas when it's like a smaller class, especially when it's like STEM students or even math majors,
Hmm.
usually they're more receptive. But I keep it a little bit separate. I like don't really mention it at work, but like I've been on TV, like people know about it. Like it's like not a secret anymore. And like if you search me online, like you're gonna find it right
Oh, it's
away.
the first thing that comes up. That's why I
Right.
was wondering, because like I was definitely that kid who always Googled my professors. And
Right.
so if I
Everyone
Googled
does.
you and found out you were a magician, I'd be like,
Yeah, I think that's a thing. Sometimes they try to be sort of chill about it or like try to like lead me to it a little bit. They're like I don't know. I've definitely had times where like I have a gig over a weekend and they're like, "So how was your weekend, professor?" I'm like, "Oh, it's good." Like,
Oh man, you're not
stuff like
like I
that.
did a gig at
Try
this
to,
fabulous
yeah,
club.
they're trying to like get it. Yeah. Or like the best was the semester when we went online.
Uh-huh.
I hadn't mentioned it to I had a really awesome class that, spring 2020, like when we abruptly had to go online.
Hmm.
And they were like math education majors. So they were just great students. It was like this really cool class of like 20 kids. Um, so that was lucky because when we went online, they were like chill about it. But um, I started doing Facebook live shows. So this was like before we understood how to use Zoom correctly.
Hmm.
So it turns out Facebook Live is a terrible platform, but
Yeah.
we didn't know.
Yeah.
And so I was doing those weekly. And I think maybe the second or third week, I was like looking in the chat and it was like all my students and they were like, "Hey, we found you." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, okay. Hi." Like,
I love that.
yeah, it was cool though. Like they were, it was just like they were coming to my show. So that's fine. It wasn't invasive. And I was like, yeah, cool. And I guess they found out about it because like Facebook, they put like you can put your little $5 in and they send the ad out to like
Hmm.
whoever they think will be a good target audience. I don't know. I only did this a few times. I'm terrible at social media. But anyway, I did this and somebody at the university I was at saw it and then like mentioned it offhandedly to one of my students, and they were like, "Oh, that's our professor." And so, they figured it out. But like, so that's cool when they kind of like when it's sort of organic like that.
Well, and I love that too, because I've been teaching middle school. I left
Nice.
that job this past year, but it
Mhm.
was funny because in my transition out, I was finally able to tell my students about my performances because
Yeah,
I say bad words and I do inappropriate things and whatever, and I knew
right.
some parent would have an issue
Of
with it.
course,
But
of
since I
course.
was leaving, it was like, well, I
Yeah,
can just talk about it, and a
yeah,
lot
that's
of them
cool.
then started to follow me on social media
Oh,
and come to my
nice.
shows and things like that. So it's
That's
really
really
cool
cool.
that you
Yeah.
teach an age group where like they can support you. Like that's cool.
Yes. I mean, that being said, it's also squeaky clean. So
Right. Yeah.
there's no, my and not by, not for restrictive reasons. It's just how I present. Like,
Right. Right.
but yes, yeah, that is nice that there's nothing controversial. Like there's no, oh, these are middle school kids, maybe they shouldn't be exposed to whatever. Yeah,
Right.
this is like not a risk. Yeah. So even though I do kind of try to keep it somewhat separate, like that's
Mhm.
not out of necessity. It's just sort of personal preference.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
No, no, that makes sense. But I don't know if it's like this in the magic world where it's like, can you bring people? Can you bring people? And it's like, oh, I'm a professor. I can absolutely bring people. Like,
Right. It can be. That varies a lot by venue.
right.
I have the luxury of mostly not taking gigs where this is a big issue
Mhm.
because I don't make a living at it.
Mhm.
But it's very much a thing with a lot of shows, right? Because you want to fill the house.
Of course.
That's everyone's
The
goal.
goal. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
So, but yeah, fortunately, I the making money at it is just a bonus. Like I'm not trying to support myself on it, which of course, there's an interesting thing about that too, because like I've definitely had other magicians who are like, "Oh, you have a day job? I'm sorry." And
Oh
it's like,
yeah.
no, I have a day
Musicians do that too.
career. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Which I can understand that that's a lot of people's goal to do it
Right.
full time. I see why it's a thing, but I just happen to not have that goal,
Mhm.
which is like not relatable to some fellow performers. But I have the day job is one that I worked really hard at that I really like. So it's, I'm not trying to do magic full time, but pros and cons on that, right? Because I don't get to perform as often, but I
Right.
also get to be choosier about which gigs I take. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and what's what I'm interested to know, and I'll get to my last couple questions
yeah.
here and ask you a little bit about this, but like the reason that I've always thought, well, it's really important to be making a living at it is because I don't see how else to be able to devote the time I need to be at the level that I want to be at. But then someone like you has been able to do that, to have a separate career but still devote the time. And that's what's really interesting to me is, that balance.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I just work really hard. So I don't have a really short answer to that. The medium answer though is that I do part of why I have a career in academia is that uh it is extremely flexible with time
Mm-hmm.
commitments. So
Mm-hmm.
you're essentially working all the time, but the actual literal time you have to spend physically at a place is pretty small compared to most jobs,
Yeah,
right?
that makes
So
sense.
like in the semesters when I have one class, like I literally have 3 hours a week when I physically have to be in a place doing something. And the rest
Mm-hmm.
of the time is, I have lots of work to do, but I don't have to be there. So
Mm-hmm.
that flexibility is a big one. Also breaks. Like I have
Yeah,
summertime. So
that
this
helps.
is, that's a big part of how I'm able to do both. And yeah, I schedule my gigs such that I have like during time off, like
Mm-hmm.
the last week I did the Magic Castle it was spring break. So like I had
Mm-hmm.
the week off work anyway, or like other times I've worked when I don't have the time off, I can like teach online or, adapt accordingly. So yeah, I happen to have a day career that is really flexible in a lot of ways. But that being said, it's a slippery slope, right? Like I still have to like do all the work. I
Right.
just have to figure out when. So but yeah, I absolutely agree with what you're saying that like succeeding in any kind of art, especially performance art, requires like a massive time commitment.
Yeah.
Like, and not just a time, it's like an energy commitment,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's not just hours spent, it's like feelings spent. Which is, there's more hours on either end of that. So, Yeah, I think also when I look at my progression in the magic world versus maybe some of my peers who, started later than I did and are booking more gigs or like more impressive gigs or whatever than I do, like, I got a PhD in the middle of it. Like it's it's doing other stuff. So, of course, it's impossible not to compare yourself to other people, but
Right.
try not to. Everybody's doing something different, so yeah, it's kind of one of these things where it's like, yeah, it's a balance, I guess. That's I would be a lot further in magic if I wasn't doing this other stuff, but
Right. Right.
like, yeah.
But you're doing it and it's working. And that's the
So
important
far so
thing.
good. If I can just keep it up. I'm back in California, so that helps.
That'll help, definitely.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask, if there might be people watching this who are like, oh my gosh, I'm kind of interested in magic, and they might already be adults, and because I say cuss words and things, so I guess probably kids, and kids don't have the attention span to be listening this long anyway.
True.
But what advice would you give to someone who's like, oh, I think I might want to get started with magic?
Yeah, so it's a little unusual to get into magic as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
You hear the typical story of like, oh, my dad bought me my first magic kit when I was 8 years old, and I
Yeah.
asked the girl at school that I could levitate her at the talent show or
Yeah.
whatever. Right? Like that's the standard route into magic.
Right.
I would say take a class. So a lot of magic venues offer classes, and it doesn't really matter what you start with. Just start with something. And usually beginner classes focus on things like cards and close-up stuff because of the accessibility. But yeah, like a lot of different venues. I mean, the ones I know, of course, the Magic Castle offers classes. During shutdown, they offered them over Zoom. So
yeah, that made so
um,
many things accessible that were not
yeah,
accessible before, but now it's
really
going
so.
back the other way, and it
Right.
sucks a little
So I don't know
bit.
if they still do it. So,
Yeah.
but if you're in LA, it's there. I know one of the venues I frequent is the Chicago Magic Lounge, and they also they offer some kind of classes. I don't know what exactly, um, but yeah, and a lot of magic shops in different cities will offer some kind of classes with some frequency. So, like the
Mhm.
town I lived in Indiana, there's the adjacent town has a magic shop and they like run classes. So, and I
Mhm.
taught one last summer. So it like most places you can find something like this. Alternatively, a lot of magicians will offer like private lessons.
Mhm.
So I would say, yeah, the best road in, I don't recommend starting with just like a book or a bunch of YouTube videos.
Mhm.
Because it's a little bit directionless. Like
Yeah.
it's better to break in with a human kind of giving you a little bit of direction. And then from there, it sort of lays the groundwork to then build upon it on your own, like
Mhm.
with books and lectures and YouTube videos or whatever it is. But yeah, I guess that's my best advice is connect with someone who is in it, and even if
Mhm.
they're just a hobbyist who hangs out at the local magic shop or whatever, somebody who knows something about the field who can kind of guide you and ideally teach you, but at least kind of get you moving in the right direction. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, so
Yeah.
yeah, seek human guidance. Very cool.
Yeah.
And then, my last question is like, if you have any advice for people who are like, multi-passionate the way that you are, balancing multiple things, like any suggestions, any ideas?
Yeah. So this is advice that I got early-ish in my magic career, before it was really career, just when it was a thing I did for fun, is that it's okay to take long breaks and it'll be
Mm.
there. So, there's a lot of sort of at the kind of micro level of like, you need to practice this every day or keep it fresh or keep it, and then that's true if you want to be in kind of fighting shape. But like if you need to take 6 months or a year or 5 years off because you're going to go to school or you're going to have a child or do something that is very involved. I mean, those are just like two examples, but like if
Mhm.
for some reason you need to take some time off, like it'll be there. You can pick it back up. I think that magic is very forgiving in that respect. Like obviously there's going to be a relearning phase, but
Mhm.
like it'll be there. And when I was given this advice, this is from my friend Alba, who's a magician who she's from Argentina, but she was living in Chicago at the time. She said that it'll not only will it be there, but like living life in between is going to make your magic better. And I found that very much
Wow.
to be the case. Yeah, which is
Mhm.
surprising advice because like you hear a lot of people in any art form who are like, you need to practice, 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 and this needs to be your whole thing. You need to practice all day, and otherwise you're not serious and you're not going to make it. Like it's art, and art comes from life experience, you know?
Mm.
So yeah, that's not to say that you don't need to practice a lot and take it very seriously, but like live your life also, and it's going to make your performance better. And that I found that very much to be the case, that my experience as a mathematician and as a person in the world like has like heavily influenced how I perform. So that's yeah, that's the best advice that I've gotten, that I've very much taken to heart and happy to pass down.
I love it. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's beautiful. That made my day.
Oh,
And you know, thank you so much for hanging out with me today
oh, thank you for having me. This is awesome.
yeah, and so people can find you at torinoquez.com and then
Yep.
your Mathematician on Instagram
Yes.
and any other places, or those are
Yeah,
the two
I'm
big.
on Facebook. I think it's Tori Noquez, comma magician, maybe on Facebook. I don't I should probably know that, huh? I'm also on YouTube, such as it is. I don't post a ton, but it's just Noquez Magic. Also, I'm just gonna put this out there. It's Noquez. It's not the easiest name to spell for some reason. Nobody seems to be able to get it right. So just,
I guess I know because I've known you for a long
you learned
time.
it as a child. Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah, that
obvious. But
helps.
turns out I've learned in the performance world, like it is not obvious.
People have trouble. Oh boy. Well,
Yeah,
I
so
will make sure that all of that information is below and on my website so people will spell it correctly and they will find you.
love it.
And hey, Tori, thank you again so much for being
Yeah,
here.
it was fun to hang out and catch up. This is cool. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.